Anything in the world, but I can never be you because I stand tall like I'm on my tiptoes, baby. You think a little too small. I got big goals, baby. Hey, where the money at? Look, I just need the info. Pronto, I go and get it and split it with my kinfolk daily.
Well, hey guys, you guys want to transition from one sport to the next? I know we wanted to focus, considering we had done the entire bracket last week, we wanted to focus on another sport here. Lots of important things going on in NFL free agency. So, I'm not sure if you guys have been following some of the recent signings, even over the last couple of days here. But it's been very interesting because now you're starting to see how teams are starting to strategize before the NFL draft. So the NFL draft is just, it's becoming, I guess, a little bit more predictable. But I guess, I'll kick it off to you. What were some of your favorite free agent signings that you've seen so far? And then I'll kick it over to Cy afterwards.
Yeah. Honestly, I like a lot of what the Bucs were able to do in terms of bringing back all their guys. Like, I didn't expect them to be able to bring back as much talent as they did with Shaq Barrett, Lavonte David, obviously tagging Chris Godwin, getting Gronk back. I was pretty impressed that they were able to bring all those guys back and then just kind of run it back.
Cy, what about you?
Can my answer be none? Like, I feel like I spent a long time going through the free agency list earlier, and even now I had it pulled up, and I was just thinking to myself, like, is there one signing that I see where I'm like, man, they got a really good bang for their buck, or it's like a two-way thing? And legitimately, like, I don't want to be biased. I'm pretty happy with my Colts re-signing Xavier Rhodes on like a $6 million contract for a one-year deal after the season he had. I was pretty happy about that. I was happy with our Marlon Mack signing. I hate to be biased, but the only reason I point to those two is because we got them at the price that we wanted, which is why I like those. As far as the overall free agency goes, I actually like the Will Fuller signing because I believe, if I remember correctly, I'm gonna make sure I'm confirming this correctly, but I know he's an injury-prone guy, but he's on a one-year, $10 million contract, and what he does when he's on the field is exceptional. And I think him lining up across from Devontae Parker in a Miami offense as they're trying to make that playoff run, I think he fits really well for them. Outside of that, I don't have a lot that I really, really, really liked because I just felt like a lot of players got overpaid this year, and it's really hard. Like, I can't understand how guys like Jonnu Smith are making 4 years, $50 million. You know what I mean? Like, I was looking at those kinds of contracts and I was like, what on earth is going on in free agency these days where Hunter Henry got a massive deal? Like, he has a lot of potential, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy or accomplish anything of major significance recently. So I just think overall, like, I don't know, like, I just think overall it's been kind of a struggle in the sense of money, but I'll let you guys touch on that. I'm actually going to keep looking through some of these to make sure I get a good answer. So y'all go ahead.
I was going to crack up because I've actually flipped my decision here. Over the weekend, all three of us were able to watch some of the games together. And of course, as we're watching basketball, NFL free agency just happens to come up, knowing us three. Cy and I were pretty critical of Curtis Samuel's contract, and Evan had brought up some great counterpoints, and I guess we finished the conversation with an agree to disagree. However, I'm actually going to flip my stance a little bit. I think Washington has actually had a remarkable free agent signing, and just overall 2021 strategy. When you look at some of their first signings, Will Jackson III on a 3-year deal means that you guys have locked up a solid corner number 2 outside of Kendall Fuller. Ronald Darby was great, but I think Ronald Darby's performance too, I believe Evan mentioned this over the weekend, was maybe overstated just because of the fact that the front seven was getting to the quarterback so quickly, right? So Darby's gone. Now you bring in a legitimate perennial threat who's young, who's under the age of 30, and he's going to be playing number 2 corner for the Washington football team. I think getting him on a 3-year deal where he can't leverage that 1 year and then go somewhere else once the salary cap increases, I think that was a smart move. And on the opposite side of the ball, speaking of another 3-year deal, Curtis Samuel's 3-year, $35 million, I believe, somewhere right around that ballpark. So he's making about $11 million a year. but just the way that they want to use him in the offense, where he could run a lot of end arounds, he can open up the middle of the field, and then you also have a 1-year signing in Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is going to be completely different from Alex Smith in that he can actually still throw the ball down the field. So, assuming that they draft a wide receiver like that Rashad Bateman statement that Evan made as well at number 2, get some height over there, opposite side of McLaurin, I think you could see a very interesting offensive scheme and setup for Washington. Obviously their defensive line is still status quo. So I think they started to, fill some holes and gaps, and I'm excited to see what they do in 2021.
Yeah, and to touch on something Sai said, the common denominator in the signings you mentioned as being huge overpays were the Patriots, which we'll get to it a little bit, but completely agree there. And I actually agree with your point as well, that it was like there's not really one that necessarily stands out. Like the Patriots obviously did the most, but I would say almost every single one of those deals they made were like way overpays. And like Washington, I think like 3 like really solid like moves. I don't think any of them were like big overpays. I don't think either of them were like bargain deals either. Like I think they were both probably, market value deals. Like you said, Will Jackson can upgrade over Darby. Samuel's the perfect fit for what we're looking for offensively, like desperate for speed. Now you have 3 guys on offense that run below 4.4s. In Curtis, Terry, and Antonio Gibson. And then you have McKissick, who's a great scat back. Logan Thomas is evolving as a tight end. The interesting thing I read today is that they're obviously looking at a receiver in the draft as well, but they're actually not looking for size even after getting Curtis Samuel. They want just more speed and more speed. So now, granted, Bateman also runs like below 4.4, so or at least below 4.5. So we'll see where they go from there. I'm biased also, but I think they probably, some of those moves maybe make them one of the winners. But I think the Jets did a nice job too, just kind of building out their team. But yeah, there wasn't really anyone that completely stood out in my opinion.
So I'll throw this out there, and I was taking a look while you guys were talking. I was like looking through just to like throw a couple of options out there to see what your thoughts were on them, because I wanted to get some. Just some ideas. First of all, we had a debate about Curtis Samuel, the 3 of us at Texas Roadhouse, while we were watching some of these games a couple of days ago. So I do think it might be fun to throw it out there. I will say, I said that when I saw the deal, I was pretty surprised to see that he's making over $10 million a year on the back of one, I would argue, above average season in which he was presented a lot of opportunities given injuries to Christian McCaffrey, and as the number 3 wide receiver in a loaded division with wide receivers. And he's clearly young. He's 25 years old, and he's got what 3-year, $34 million contract, a $34.5 million contract. I felt that was slightly high personally, just because I felt that there needs to be a little more proof in the pudding for me before I'm willing to pay somebody over $10 million a year for 3 years, because that's a pretty big contract for a wide receiver in the grand scheme of things. I mean, he's getting paid right now, if I look at it correctly, as a top 20 to 25 wide receiver in the NFL, which I can't really put Curtis Samuel in the top 20 to 25 wide receivers in the NFL for me. But I guess age and potential plays into it. So I figured I'd have you guys talk about it on the air, because I want to see your perspectives. Obviously, you can touch on it as the football team fan, and as a fan, I believe as a fan of the signing, and then Zach as a unbiased third party. I want to see what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think Curtis is actually extremely underrated. Like, I think you look at it, 24, 25, whatever he is, I don't know what more you could really ask of him at that age. And given the situation in Carolina with such great weapons all around him last year with Robbie and DJ, DJ's been there a few years, and obviously, McCaffrey there. So, and I think it's just such a perfect fit with obviously our look for speed and also our look for versatility, like guys you can use in a multitude of ways. Obviously, you can see that we've already, have targeting that with Gibson, who was a wide receiver in college. We moved him to running back. McKissick is another similar kind of guy. So it's maybe for another team, I would agree with you, but a team that's going to use him, how you need to use him. I think that you get that's certainly worth the money. And then the one stat I'll throw out you is he had the highest catch rate last year on deep balls. And he was also incredible on third down. So like, you know, I think those types of stats kind of raise his value a little bit. And also you have Ron, Scott Turner, and Marty Herney who know from a character perspective that he's going to be a good fit as well. So that kind of, you know, close relationship with him will help.
Yeah, and in my opinion on it too is I look at it like from a contract standpoint. When you have a multitude of these receivers, knowing that, hey, based on this $110 billion TV deal that just got signed over the next 11 years, so pretty much $10 billion a year that the NFL is going to be raking in. You know, the salary cap is going to increase substantially next year. So it's only advantageous for good or even above average receivers to sign 1-year deals. You saw that with Juju Smith going back to Pittsburgh. You saw that with Emmanuel Sanders going to Buffalo. So just the fact that Washington was able to get a guy in for 3 years while he's developing, and he's going to be in his prime in Washington, in my opinion, right? Just from like an age perspective. So I think just making sure that they can sign that guy for 3 years and not have to worry about what to do with him if he does go off and he has this great season 1 year later was beneficial for them. And I also look at just like the restructuring that is currently going on with many teams. I mean, Atlanta just got into the salary cap, but it's not through anything spectacular. I mean, they did get rid of Kean O'Neil, but they restructured Matt Ryan's contract. So what's going to happen in 2022? Oh, we're going to have the same problem that we had in 2021 because we're just pushing money. I respect the fact that Washington just got the job done. They went out, got their guy, overpaid maybe a little bit. I know New England was looking at him. I know Carolina wanted to re-sign him pretty bad. And they went out, got their guy, paid him. And I think there's an appreciation there. So I'm all for it.
I just wonder if there's a little bit of bias in the sense of him making a little bit more money, given the fact that there was that Panthers combination of people and the football team. Because I wonder if they would have paid as much if it wasn't Ron Rivera and team over there. But teach their own. I think it's just different perspectives on Curtis. He might come into his own. If he does, then the contract will certainly be worth it. I think I always look at wide receiver as a position I'm not saying it's easy to fill, but it is one that is draftable. It is one that is able to be filled through the draft, and one that you don't have to pay a lot of money to hit in the draft for. Whereas like other positions, I think might be a little bit more difficult to use on the draft. So I think I'm just a believer in not overpaying at the wide receiver position unless it's a true superstar receiver, and even that a lot of times hasn't really worked out. So I'm a little. And I think that might segue me to my next point. What do you guys think of like the money that's been being shelled out to free agents in general, even with the reduced cap? Because I think I have a strong bias, and you guys know this. Like I'm whatever Chris Ballard does, I'm on board with him because I love the guy with everything that I got in the sense of what he's done for the team with in a short period of time. But I'm a full believer in his philosophy. So I think that I've adapted that pretty strongly over the last 2 years, of the sense of like, we're not going to go overpay guys to come to us. Like we're going to set the market. And if they aren't willing to join, we'll find other routes. And I think a lot of that is accumulating draft picks. It's making the right trades, and it's re-signing your own players. Like that's the big thing for me. Like I think a lot of teams you're seeing a lot of transition from one player to other teams, whereas I'm a big fan of keeping your best guys as opposed to like trying to replace them with other guys that might not necessarily be a fit and overpaying. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of that in the market. A couple contracts that really stood out to me were, if he's healthy, Galladay's amazing, but Galladay made 4 years, $72 million coming off a season where he was hurt. 4 years, $72 million. That's $18 million a year. We're looking at guys like Trey Hendrickson, who was great for the Saints. Like I'm not trying to take that away from him, but 4 years, $60 million coming off a contract from the Saints there. Trout Williams is terrific, but the man is 33 years old, and he made 6 years, $138 million. And the funny part of that is, I was like, people were saying, oh, Trent Williams might come to the Colts. I was like, Chris Ballard would rather drop half his team before he signed Trent Williams to a $130 million contract. I just think a lot of times people pay a lot for older guys too. Like, we're looking at Galladay's 28, and I'm not saying that, 28 is super old, but we're looking at 32. He's going to be making $18 million. Like, I don't know. Has he done enough to prove that? Some of these deals just kind of get me. Like the Hunter Henry one, I still crack up about. 3 years, $37.5 million. Shout out to him. He got paid, but like, really? Like, it just seems like that's a redundant trend. I will say, as I was looking through the contracts, one of the few that I really, really liked is Yannick, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I always mess it up. Nagoya, or I think it's something of that nature. The end for the Ravens, who they got from Jacksonville initially. He's a stud, and they actually got him on a really good deal, in my opinion, where he was 2 years, 26, and I think for his prowess as a defensive end and what he brings to – he went to the Raiders from Baltimore on a 2-year, $26 million contract. I think that when your question earlier, Zach, if I had to answer that again, I think that would be my favorite signing because I think he fits perfectly into that Raiders defense, and I think he's a really good deal for what he was worth because it's a shorter contract, so it's not like you're locking in a big one. And he's young; he's like 20. He's 26. He's 26 years old, and you got him on a 2-year deal. So those are a couple ones that I was looking at, but I just feel like free agents are getting paid so much, and I'm just a big believer in re-signing your own and using the draft a little more. Not to say you shouldn't sign free agents, but like I do think that there's something to be said about overpaying veterans and guys that are older to try to win now or try to win out in the next 2 to 3 years. Whereas in reality, like you could be using this money to build a stronger nucleus. That's just my perspective.
Well, I can tell you some of the free agents I don't like. I could not fathom paying Corey Davis 3-year, $37 million or $34 million, whatever it was, with $27 million guaranteed. I mean, Corey Davis, this is a guy who struggled with drops, and he didn't have any productive years until AJ Brown was drafted and stole some of the corners over to the other side of the field. I just don't necessarily understand that one. And who is the running back that went to Las Vegas to back up Josh Jacobs? Was that David Johnson?
Kenyon Drake.
Kenyon Drake on a $10 million deal. That just didn't make sense to me either, considering the fact that they really want to make Josh Jacobs their true back. I thought their backups were the Jalen Richards, the Bookers, that they did a fine job. I just don't understand what they're planning on doing with Kenyon Drake, but I'll defer to E on some of the ones that he didn't like very much.
E, before you jump in, can I make a point to Zach real quick?
Of course.
Just real quick. I am curious to see your perspective on Curtis Samuel versus Corey Davis, given the fact that their contracts were basically like $2 or $3 million off their set price. Corey Davis made $2 or $3 million more than Curtis Samuel. Corey Davis last season, in 14 games, he didn't get to play full 16 because he was hurt for 2 of them or whatever it was. In 14 games, he had 985 yards receiving. He was on pace for 1,100 yards and about 7 to 8 touchdowns. I would say that is way more worth the contract, in my opinion, than what Curtis Samuel was making, because even though Curtis Samuel's all-purpose yards were over 1,000 yards, from the receiving perspective, we've never seen him come close to 1,000 yards. I think he was a couple hundred away, and I believe he played all 16 games. So when I look at it that way, I don't know that I believe that Curtis Samuel would be worth his contract if you think Corey Davis isn't worth his. And they're the same age range. Curtis Samuel's 25, Corey Davis is 26. So if I would almost argue Corey Davis's potential is just as good, if not higher, age-wise, and he is shown more as a receiver. So I'm just throwing that out there.
I think just to piggyback off that real quick, I think the difference is that Corey Davis struggled as a wide receiver one. And hey, look, Curtis Samuel is not a wide receiver one. I get that, but they're using him for completely different reasons. They want him to be that guy that converts third downs when Ryan Fitzpatrick, is escaping the pocket. He's going to be there 100% of the time. Corey Davis is an outside receiver, so he's playing out there in twin. And I think, the stats speak for themselves. Before they got AJ Brown, Corey Davis really struggled. He struggled with drops. He struggled with productivity, despite his sheer athleticism and his height. I mean, he's a freak of nature. I understand why they went after that guy and signed him, but he does have a past of underperforming when he is the guy. So I just think the fact that he is the wide receiver one there could be a little dangerous, but I get your point too.
I like Corey Davis, but that is a good point. Like, what does him as a wide receiver one on the Jets look like? I suspect they're in the market too, but I mean, how are they going to? They have a lot of draft picks, but I don't know. And it's about fit. Like, that's what I support when teams go about free agency. Like, find the guy that's a perfect fit for your football team on all levels. And I like getting the younger guys too. Like, to answer the question on some crazy ones, the Galladay number I thought was huge. Trent Williams was, oh boy. And then like all of the Patriots signings. Like I agree with you on Hunter Henry, but I'm even more blown away by Jonnu Smith, who I kind of thought Washington was going to look at as a number 2 tight end. Whereas the Patriots paid him like high-end number 1 tight end money in addition to doing the same for Hunter Henry. I don't know what they were doing. Nelson Aguilar got a lot of money from the Patriots. I mean, I have no idea what the Patriots are doing, to be honest with you. Those are probably the ones that stood out. Mainly just the Patriots, really. I mean, what do you got? Like, what is the plan for the Patriots? Do we even I didn't expect them to be spending so much.
I think they're trying to resurrect their 2 tight end set. And admittedly, I will say that the 2 guys they signed are high potential guys. They love their 2 tight end sets with Josh McDaniels. They've never been the guys to lock into big receivers, but they will always stack up their tight ends in room. Like they've always been that kind of team. Here's the thing, like they're literally spending, if you do the combined math, I'm doing it in my head, they're spending $38 million. They spent $87 million over the next 3 years for the next 3 years, 4 years, they're spending $87 million. Jonnu Smith for 4 and Hunter Henry for 3 on their tight end room. I think their thought was maybe the wide receiver market isn't what they wanted to invest in, given how pricey the contracts were. Because if you look at it, they're essentially paying like just a little bit more for both of those guys than a team like the Giants is paying for Galladay over a 4-year contract. So if you look at it that way, maybe that was their logic. I think maybe they're locking in, being like, okay, Cam is going to do better in this kind of system. We're going to stack the box with more tight ends, be able to run the ball more with their Damian Harris core and pass more to their tight ends. I can kind of see the logic there. I'm just surprised. And I will also say Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry have the potential to be great. Like Jonnu Smith has the potential to be great. I don't know that his utilization was great in Tennessee. Hunter Henry's just been hurt. When he's been healthy, he's a great receiving tight end. It just seems like a lot to spend on tight ends. And it would make a little bit more sense to me if you got one or the other. But the fact that they paid both is what really blew my mind. I guess they just had a lot of cap room and felt that that's where they should invest their money. I don't know. I trust Bill Belichick, though. Like they had one down year, but the man has won every other year of his career. And I think he'll figure it out, like in the sense of like drafting and trading and kind of making the pieces come together. He'll get there. So I don't know. It's hard for me to scrutinize the Patriots given their track record in the sense of free agent signings and money spent and things like that. So I'll put it that way. The Galladay one is so interesting because if he's healthy, I mean, he clearly could be one of the best receivers in the league, but even then that still seems like a lot of money because he's making close to Julio money? Like that's absurd to me. Like Julio is one of the greatest wide receivers of all time. Kenny Galladay has had one amazing season and the rest have not been up to par, mainly because of injuries, but that's my thought on that.
Going off the Patriots, follow-up question, and I am judging Bill Belichick here. This offseason came off as desperate to me, like desperate to save some face after Tom went out and won a Super Bowl after you let him go, and all that kind of stuff. So my question is, where do these moves put the Patriots in I'll even just say the AFC East pecking order? Does this put them near the Bills?
See, I'm glad you asked this because everyone lost their minds when they saw all these free agent signings because they happened one after the other. It was like Matt Judon, Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry, yada, yada, yada. They got the kid Jalen Mills out of Philly. And people were so emotional from this. And they were like, oh, dude, New England's back. We're going to the Super Bowl. No, they're not even winning the division next year. Buffalo is going to stomp the yard again for the second straight year. And, oh, by the way, you have a team in the Miami Dolphins that you could argue has a better defense than New England, even with those free agent signings and with Gilmore coming back. So, I think it's going to be a long road ahead. Now, I do think they beat the Jets twice. I think there are some improvements. But if you're telling me this team is now going to be like an 11-5 team, get out of here. I don't buy it one bit.
I'm with you guys there, and I'm not saying that these signings are going to put the Patriots over the top, but I do think they have cap space, and they need to spend it somewhere. And I think they're looking more long term than they are one year, because these aren't 1 year signings. All these signings that we're looking at, or at least the major ones, are multiple year contracts. So I think their goal is to kind of establish a nucleus. I'm not giving up on Belichick figuring it out over the next couple of years. He's got some work to do, obviously, with the completely new situation, and obviously the Bills being as good as they are, and even teams like Miami competing the way that they've been competing. I'm not going to say it's easy, but I'm not out on Belichick, dude. Like, we're talking one of the greatest coaches, if not the greatest coach of all time. I think a lot of people take 1 year and with Brady leaving and everything like that, I want to forget how good Belichick is, but we got to understand that there was a lot of moving pieces for him last year, and I think I got faith that he'll figure it out. If there's anyone that's going to figure it out, it's going to be Bill Belichick, man. Like, just look at all his coordinators that have gone to other teams and have done absolutely nothing, and look at what he's continued to do. Even on a down year, his team was probably better than what these guys have done in other places. Like, I'm not out on Belichick. He'll figure it out. That's why it's hard for me to scrutinize. Like, if this was any other team, I think I'd scrutinize them a lot more. But I just think, like, I think they'll figure it out over the next couple of years. With that being said, I want to throw this out there. A couple of signings that I thought were really surprising in terms of price point. You're going to hear some bias from me on this one, but first of all, what do you guys think of? I don't understand how we got Xavier Rhodes for $6 million. Like, I'm actually completely surprised by that, given what some of the other cornerbacks went for. I don't know how he only signed a 1 year, $6 million contract. I'm super happy about that. The other one I was surprised by was Kean O'Neil literally went $4 million to Dallas on a 1 year contract. I realize he hasn't been amazing recently, but that seems like a very small amount of money for a guy that has real impact potential. And apparently he might play linebacker there too. So those are a couple that really stood out to me. Zach, I know you brought up Marlon Mack on a 1 year, $2 million contract. And I think that brings up a good conversation about running backs in general and their price points. So what are your thoughts on some of those signings, guys, as well as any other signings you thought were surprising in terms of, like, really low price point for a guy that you thought would probably make more?
Yeah, no, I like all three of the signings you just mentioned, albeit, losing Kean O'Neil was tough, but Atlanta didn't really have any other choice because Thomas Dimitriov, our previous GM, put us in a really bad spot. But I really like all of those. I think the one that was the most intriguing was Marlon Mack going back for 1 year, $2 million. It just goes to show you that the players are also believing in Chris Ballard, because Marlon Mack knows he could have gone anywhere else for a higher price point, even post-injury, and that was an ugly injury. So, you definitely know that some of the Colts are maybe taking less money in the market just to re-sign and build what they're seeing and what has been built since Andrew Luck left. So I like all of those. I think another one that I will mention is getting Marvin Jones for a 2 year, $12 million in Jacksonville. I like that one because Trevor Lawrence is going to need targets, and DJ Shark, he needs someone more than just DJ Shark. I think Marvin Jones has the athleticism. He has the height to be a solid number 2. And, I know he's a little bit on the older side, but getting him for 2 year, $12 million is nothing in my opinion. So like that one as well.
Yeah, I agreed on Rhodes. I mean, I kind of throw those away, the re-signings, just because, like, in that case, I think it's definitely like gave the, home team, whatever you want to say, discount. But yeah, obviously that's a great value. The big one for me, a guy that went to a new team, was Anthony Harris, $5 million 1 year for the Eagles. Anthony Harris is a beast. I was furious because I'm like, we need a free safety. There was talk of us being interested in Harris, and it's like, even after doing Samuel and all those guys, like, we could come up with $5 million. I mean, come on. And to let him go to the Eagles, not that I'm worried about the Eagles in the slightest sense of the imagination, but yeah, man, I wish we could have done that. So I wonder if maybe there's like a safety thing. I mean, I don't know much about, like, historically how safeties do in free agency, but I mean, maybe Anthony Harris.
Maybe it's your Redskins. Maybe it's your Redskins paying Landon Collins the money that they paid him that made teams a little bit more weary of massive contract. But admittedly, I will say I thought Landon Collins was an absolute beast, so I thought he deserved a good bit of money. But I did think the Redskins paid, or at the time the Redskins, now the football team, paid a lot more than I think I would have paid him. But I think safety contracts have been historically, like, hard to predict because it's such a hard position to, like, gauge, and zone and system and scheme is so important for safety play. Like, you can't just take there's few safeties in the history of the NFL that you can take and put in any system and have them succeed. Like, it's very rare and few and far between. And I think you see that a lot with safety. So it seems like teams are being a little more tentative, because I haven't seen a big safety contract this year at all. Like, the Harris one is a really good point. Of like, he's so good. Like, I don't even understand. Like, and he's not that old either. Like, I'm really surprised by the money he made. Like, at least with Rhodes, he's 31. So there's a little bit of weight to the fact that he's a little bit older. So maybe that's why he made a little bit less. And of course, the discount comes into play when you know it's a system that you're comfortable in and you can succeed in. But yeah, that was really surprising. That was a really good point with Harris. I'm with you on the Jones being a good piece for Lawrence developing. If it was the Colts, I wouldn't want them to pay Jones that amount of money, because I just don't. I think like he's well past his prime. I just don't think he's that player that can, like, he can be a decent like second or third option to like kind of get, make a big play for you here or there. But I just don't see Marvin Jones as a guy that's going to be like somebody you can lean on anymore. But for somebody like Jacksonville, who clearly isn't going to be like competing for an AFC championship next year or even for the playoffs, like, it's a good signing for them to like help their new quarterback kind of get his feet under him. And I'm always a fan of teams like trying to build around their rookie quarterback, like, confidence, right? Because like, it's not like Marvin Jones is their long-term solution at wide receiver, but he's a guy that is going to help Lawrence get his feet under him and have some like guys to throw the ball to. And he's a veteran presence that can really help a young guy out. So in that way, I appreciate it from a leadership perspective, because from my understanding, he's a really good locker room guy.
Well, we've also got some free agents that have gone unsigned. So I'm actually curious to see which ones you think should be most prioritized. So just right off the bat, let's go with some of the edge rushers that are still looking for a team. We've got Jadavian Clowney recently coming off injuries. Honestly, Tennessee took a risk and it did not pay off last year. Melvin Ingram, another South Carolina guy, go Cox. And then finally, Justin Houston, who went unsigned as well from Indianapolis. I mean, out of those three, actually now looking at it, Carlos Dunlap as well from Seattle. So out of those four guys, which one do you think will get signed first, or maybe get signed to the most amount of money?
The most amount. It would be absolutely shocking if it wasn't Clowney, but go ahead, E.
Yeah, I don't know if I have a particular opinion. I mean, I'd definitely be willing to, depending on the number, gamble on Clowney and hoping he stays healthy. But Dunlap had a nice little impact too after we got traded last year, but not for the most money. But
how old is Dunlap though? That's the one thing I'm trying to figure. He's 32 now, so I do worry a little bit about that. Justin Houston's not going to make a lot of money, man. Like Houston was really good for us his first season with the Colts, but last year you could tell, like, even though his numbers kind of make it seem like he had a really good season, he had big plays here and there, but he was not a consistent force anymore. Like, you can tell he's gotten older and he's lost some of that speed and ability to get to quarterback that he used to have, because he was more like a positional kind of fill-in for us, which is why, like, we're not going to, like, if he comes back, he's not getting paid a lot. Like, Houston's not going to make a big contract with us, and I doubt he gets a big contract somewhere else. Conley's still 28 or 29 years old. Yeah, he's 28. So I bet he gets paid some of money, even if it's on a one-year deal. Like, he's even without, like, statistically speaking, you can see an impact when he's on the field in the sense of his athleticism and his ability and his size. So he'll get paid more than any of those guys, in my opinion, just because he's 28, and they can still bank on the potential of, if he's healthy, you can still get a solid above average lineman out of him. Problem with Ingram is another South Carolina guy. He's a little bit older, even though out of all of these guys, he's probably, you could argue, the most impactful over the last couple of years in terms of, maybe not as much last year, but the 2 years before that, Ingram was one of the best edge rushers in the NFL, and it's in the terms of getting to the quarterback. So curious about that. Xavier Woods and Kareem Jackson are available when you're looking at the safety market. I'm intrigued by those guys and what they're going to do. And the other thing that really shocks me is the Chiefs just straight up cut Eric Fisher. I wonder how teams are going to look at. Yeah, no interest, but I'm looking at Fisher, wondering what teams are going to do about him, because he's 30. He's not like super old, so I'm a little surprised by that one. Yeah, I'm looking over here. That's like pretty shocking to me that they just straight up cut him, given the concerns they had on the line.
Yeah, Yeah, I know. Okay, I got one more for you guys, and then I'm done with some of the free agents that have not signed yet. Let's go wide receiver. T.Y. Hilton, Sammy Watkins, Antonio Brown, Golden Tate. Out of those top 4 that remain, which one do you think you would want to sign to your team if you were a GM? And I guess who would be the most expensive as well?
Sorry, who was the second one?
Sammy Watkins was the second.
It was if I got it correctly, it's T.Y., Sammy Watkins, AB, and Golden Tate. Go ahead, Evan.
I'm most interested to see where AB goes, but I kind of expect him to stay. But Seattle's in there too, so I'm most interested to see where he goes. And I guess in terms of most money, I kind of expect T.Y. to go back to the Colts, which probably means he's going to take a slight discount. So I might take definitely not Watkins. So I'll say AB on both.
Hilton will make more money than AB, and he should make more money than AB. He's easily going to make more money than AB because even though AB had a good season last year as a third option for the Buccaneers, you can't assume he'll do that in any team he goes to. He's also 33 years old. T.Y.'s got 2 years less than him. And even though the beginning of the season, T.Y. had a slow start, he finished the season really dang hot and had some big games. So I think a lot of people said, T.Y.'s washed up. And then he came out and had I think it was 500 yards in 5 or 6 weeks or something like that. And then everybody's like, okay, maybe not. So T.Y. will get paid. I think what the Colts are doing with him is this. We told him go explore the market but just give us an opportunity to match any contract you're given. So that's the approach we took. I think we're still very much in on him, and I hope we get him back because I love him. He's a great leader, and he plays great for us when he's on the field. Other thing you got to consider with T.Y. is Brady won a Super Bowl, and he was still on the football to Antonio Brown. Philip Rivers, admittedly, had a decent season, but he wasn't the kind of guy that was going to get T.Y. very heavily involved, given the fact that T.Y. is a downfield receiving guy. So I think he deserves a little more credit. I definitely don't consider Golden Tate or Sammy Watkins anywhere in the conversation of close to getting the highest paid out when compared to those other two guys, because those two have shown out recently. Watkins has been really hurt, and even though he's younger, I haven't seen a lot from him. And then Golden Tate, I think he's just washed up now. A couple years ago, Golden Tate was great, but I think he's just washed up now. He didn't really bring much of anything last year of significance. So I think T.Y. gets paid the most. Antonio probably gets paid a couple million less than T.Y.
Not a lot of exciting names left.
I was going to say,
Okay.
I'm running out of fumes here. I'm I think we kind of have a decision on everyone for the most part. I mean, the Allen Robinsons got tagged, the Chris Godwin's got tagged. A lot of these decisions have already been made. I would have liked to see Brandon Sheriff get that long-term deal, but I guess that'll be next year thing. But outside of that, I mean, I think we're pretty good. You guys want to close this out? And I'm not sure where to go from here.
I got a couple of quick honorable mentions. I don't know what the rule is on the tag, but I think if even under the tag, you can still negotiate and get a deal done, because Scherf getting $18 million as a guard is way too much. But I mean, I'm glad we got to hold on to him. And the tag and trades too. I don't think the Allen Robinson story is a done deal. Even a guy like Scherf, those stories I don't think are quite done. And my other honorable mention is the Giants. I was laughing earlier today. You might appreciate this. Everyone on Instagram and Twitter and stuff were like, oh, look at the Giants' weapons that they've added for Daniel Jones. And they mentioned John Ross in there, and they mentioned Kyle Rudolph in there, which really made me chuckle. I'm like, yeah, I'm real worried about John Ross and Kyle Rudolph. Don't get me wrong. I'm, semi-worried about Galladay despite the overpay. But, yeah.
I will make the point that it's more in a holistic perspective, though, right? Because John Ross can be a productive 3 or 4 for them, but we're looking at a team that has Kenny Galladay, Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Kyle Rudolph, John Ross, and then Saquon Barkley coming back. They definitely have weapons. They have one of the best offensive, cores in the NFL, in my opinion, at least in the sense of, if you look at that division, they definitely do. It's not even really. I mean, I guess Dallas probably is right there with them, but the football team in Philly are nowhere close in the sense of holistic offensive weapons for their quarterback. The Giants have a core there. The main thing being can they get Daniel Jones to throw the football to their guys as opposed to the other team? And can they get their offensive line to kind of stay intact and provide that? Because I think the Giants have a lot of potential going forward, more than I initially thought. But
I just laughed at the inclusion of John Ross. Their offense is great, but other than Daniel Jones, who's garbage. But I just laughed at, and Kyle Rudolph is washed too.
And I'm a size inclusion of Evan Ingram. Evan Ingram had 15 drops last year, and 7 of them went into the hands of a defenders. So
dude, Evan Ingram is still a top 7 receiving tight end in the NFL, though. Like bad drops, but if you go look at him statistically, Evan Ingram is still one of the best receiving tight ends in the NFL.
They've been saying that for 5 years. He's supremely talented. He's like David.
He is. No. He's done way more than Njoku ever has. Go look at his stats. I'm straight up serious. Like if you go look at the last couple of years.
Stat out for you: 15 drops, 7 of them went into the hands of the defender.
You can talk about drops, but you're not talking about yardage, and you're not talking about receptions. You're not talking about those stats either. Evan Ingram, if you look at the receiving stats, is a top 5 to 7 receiving tight end in the NFL. It's noticeable when you look at the holistic scheme of tight ends in the NFL. There's not a lot of good receiving tight ends. Like if you're going to complain about Evan Ingram, you could probably complain about 30 other tight ends that play for other teams, right? Because there's only if I ask you right now who are like 5 tight ends, receiving tight ends better than Evan Ingram, it's not going to be a very quick, easy list, right? Like it's just
I don't think it's that hard
in that conversation.
I feel like that's a pretty easy one.
Okay, let's do it. It'll be a nice one.
Kelsey, Kittle.
Okay, well, Kittle was hurt last year, but sure. Okay, and Rob. Okay, we're going to talk about Rob because he did.
You went to Rob.
Rob Gronkowski was good in the playoffs, but go look at his statistics. Evan Ingram was better.
Rob is a funny one.
Raiders. Why is his name Waller?
Darren Waller's up there. Those are the top 3.
Hunter Henry when healthy.
Okay, no, I'm not throwing Hunter Henry in. He hasn't done anything recently.
When healthy.
Okay. Also, the fact that Zach threw in the fact that Zach said Gronk before Waller it's like has me fucking excuse my language, has me cracking up, bro.
Logan Thomas.
Oh wait, he's retired. Antonio Gates. Oh wait, nope. Tony Gonzalez. Falcons. 06.
Anything in the world, but I can never be you because I stand tall like I'm on my tiptoes, baby. You think a little too small. I got big goals, baby. Ain't where the money at? Look, I just need the info. Pronto, I go and get it, split it with my kinfolk daily. And